Hey guys, the Airsoft Tech here, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing Airsoft Teching Q&A. I haven't done one of these videos for about 3 years or so, 2 or 3 years. So it's been a really long time, and I've been wanting to do one ever since I made the last one. So here we go. It's the show where I answer as many of your questions as I can in about 10 minutes. So let's just get right down to the first question.
DannyBoy823 asks, a little more in depth as to why some guns still sound bad no matter how many times you shim, what things are commonly missed and overlooked during the shimming process, and how some things can't be avoided.
So without wasting any time at all, I want to say go ahead and go watch my video on how to shim. I know you probably have. Watch it again and pay special attention to the topic about motor grip, alignment, along with the M4 grip and the lower receiver and the gearbox shell. It's extremely important. I actually brought, or have this right at my desk here to talk about this because right here is extremely important. As you can see, I have this angle shimmed out here between the grip and the lower receiver because that's where a lot of bad shimming sound comes from, is that you get your beveled pinion perfect with the method that I show you, but then when you put your gun all together, it sounds terrible still. That's probably because, if your shimming's good, it's probably because this alignment here is really bad between the grip and the lower receiver. And the thing you do there is you just simply shave it down or Dremel it down to where the grip is just touching the lower gearbox and not the lower receiver. And you can see if you do a really good job, you can barely do it like I did, and it works just fine. That's I've coined that shimming the grip to the lower receiver. I know there were techs that used to do this a long time ago as well. Kind of became a thing after I started doing it many years ago. But yeah, that's an extremely important thing to do, or else you're going to have really bad angles there almost all the time, because no two grips and no grip and receiver meshes very well. So you got to do it yourself. That's number one. Number two, you're probably you might have a loose motor in your M4 grip here actually. And that's likely because your motor is very tiny compared to the space that's in here. And so what you can do is you can wrap layers of electrical tape around the center of your motor can, and that can actually help shim the motor to the grip so it doesn't wobble while you're pulling the trigger or firing on full auto. That's number two. Number three, make sure you're getting a good pinion and bevel mesh. Now, I'm not talking about height and shimming. I'm talking more particularly about the brands. So, I mean, we all know that sometimes parts don't fit together when they're from different brands. It's the same thing with gears. So if you take a off-brand Lonex pinion and try to mesh together with SHS bevel Gen 3 from like 5 years ago, they're not going to mesh very well. Same thing if you take a Lonex pinion along with Siege Tech, little short bevel teeth. They're not going to mesh very well. So you want to find a bevel and a pinion that mesh very well. It just helps by keeping the brands together. SHS pinion tends to mesh very well with an SHS bevel. Number four, another thing that can really throw off your shimming. Make sure that you end test your gear spinning by dropping the gearbox shell into the lower receiver and screwing everything down, putting all the bolts in, tying everything up like this down here, but don't insert your motor, and then try spinning your gears. If they're extremely tight suddenly, I've noticed that sometimes your bushings are actually crushed in by the lower receiver. And what you can do then is, you don't have a whole lot of options, but something you can do is you can actually grind down the external surface of the bushings here to prevent them from pushing up against the inside of the lower gearbox receiver, or the lower receiver. That's really about all I can think of when it comes down to bad shimming, or having good shimming but the end result not being as good. Yeah, that's all I can think of off the top of my head, so I hope that helps.
The Ghost asks, how do you deal with feeding issues and mid-cap syndrome, nozzle misalignment, etc.? I feel like that is one of the most difficult parts of teching. Whatever happens in a gearbox is easy by comparison.
So I feel like people overcomplicate this problem. This typically happens with high rate of fire guns, or a gun that you've thrown a lot of aftermarket parts into. You've probably switched the lower receiver, the hop-up chamber, the gearbox shell, whatnot, and suddenly you're finding that your gun's not feeding right. Or you've upgraded your gun to like 12 rounds a second to 55 in a DSG, and you just can't get it to feed at all, or feed right. So one of the first things I always do is I check my magazines. Sometimes your magazines are old and they wear out, and so you have to replace those springs in them or restretch them, or just get the dirt out of the channel of them. Sometimes you'll find out that that works wonders, and I do that to my magazines probably about once a year. So definitely do that. Next thing, watch my video on magazine shimming and fitment with an M4 receiver, because that'll solve a lot of your problems, or it tends to for me. Another thing to watch out for is when you're swapping all these aftermarket parts together with feeding especially, I've noticed that sometimes your mag release is actually not tall enough on the lip where the magazine catches on to get the magazine to feed into the hop-up chamber. That has happened to me a couple times. Watch out for it because that might be happening to you right now if your gun just won't feed. In terms of air nozzle alignment, people will buy like an SHS M4 air nozzle and then they'll think M4 air nozzle and M4 should work fine, right? Always check to make sure that your, sort of low quality control parts like SHS are actually built to spec. Sometimes you'll get a appropriate color SHS M4 nozzle, but then it will actually be a hair too short or a hair too long. It might actually be the wrong air nozzle. And so you can cut them down, you can trim them down, can't really add distance to them. So if you're too short, you're just out of luck, honestly. But if it's too long, you can trim it down to get it to fit exactly. Another thing to do is obviously you can glue your air nozzle to the tappet plate. Sometimes I've noticed that on high rate of fire builds, your spring in your magazine will push really hard up against the air seal nozzle and kind of push it up a little bit, and that'll cause a feeding issue because the air nozzle is meant to go straight back and forth. So sometimes if it's catty corner up, it won't cycle properly. So glue your air seal nozzle down. That tends to work a little better. And also just kind of run through your gearbox and really understand how the feeding mechanism works from gearbox to magazine to BB going down range. Sometimes you'll notice small little problems like maybe your aftermarket tappet plate is not being pulled back by your aftermarket sector gear far enough. So there's little problems you encounter here and there. Visually and conceptually understand how the feeding mechanism works, and you can 9 times out of 10 solve all the problems there.
Marinus de Drew asks, bushings versus bearings, pros and cons, and what application to use each in.
So the good old bushing versus bearing question. Generally speaking, use your bushings for your extremely high stress builds, your DMRs, your high FPS, high rate of fire DSGs and single stroke sector gear builds, anything that you just don't want to ever touch again, bushings tend to be a more reliable option. Bearing wise, use those in your lower stress builds, under 30 rounds rate of fire, that kind of thing, is what I tend to do. You can use them in DSGs, just make sure you have very nice bearings like Modified Ceramics. I do know that there are some out there that people consider better. For the life of me, I cannot remember the brand name off the top of my head. If I remember them or if someone tells me them in the comments, I'll like that comment or whatever. But I just tend to go with bushings just because they're going to last significantly longer. It's one less thing I have to worry about. Your shimming can be a little less perfect with bushings than with bearings. With bearings, it really needs to be on point. With bushings, you have a little more room for error. So that's my take on it. I know some people are going to have other opinions on that because I do know people that use nice bearings like DMRs and high stress DSGs. I just prefer bushings because it's like one less thing to worry about for me.
Camden Walters asks, how do I get my service out there? I know the whole build a rep in the community and start there, but after getting my service on Hop Up and telling friends, I still haven't been able to get any traction. Please help.
So I take particular interest in this question. It must be extremely difficult as a newer tech in this market to get the regular customer basis you would need to make money doing tech work. It must be very difficult, especially with big players out there like Umbrella Armories and all these other small shops around the country that have a good name for themselves. It must be hard, I can imagine. So I replied to this question. I told the person to send me an email of their work, and if I felt like it met a particular standard that I deemed necessary, then I'd promote it. So a new thing I'm going to try to do is I want people to send me videos of their tech work and of their gun functioning, and if I deem that they are a reputable person to accept tech work, then I'll try to promote particularly them. And so I'll try to make a video. I first have to get enough of these submissions first to actually make a video. I'm not just going to make one for every single person. So I'll try to maybe do this once a month. If I get 5 or 6 every month that I deem appropriate and good quality work to receive tech work, then I'll try to make a video, hopefully once a month or so. So yeah, send me your gun tech work to my email that's in my About section on YouTube. And like I said, if I think it's appropriate work, then I'll try to promote it for you because it'll help get you out there and help get you some customers.
Joshua Williams asks, what is the best fix for the anti-reverse latch issue with the newer Siege Tech gears that don't have the normal spot on the bevel gear to catch on?
So this is a super simple question that I can answer very quickly. Basically, you have to take your anti-reverse latch and take a Dremel to it and grind it down square to where it will actually catch on the continuing teeth on that gear. Siege Tech, I don't particularly know why. I believe it was because they wanted to come to a one-piece bevel and not a two-piece heat-fitted bevel. So they did this whole one bevel design, I think, to just make it stronger. And so that made it to where they had to have the continuing teeth, I believe, is what the idea was. And so the simplest thing you can do is just grind down the anti-reverse latch to where it's square, and then make sure it catches on those teeth. That's all you gotta do. It's very simple, taking maybe 3 minutes. Alright guys, that was all I have time for today. I hope those questions and answers were appropriate and interesting for you guys. Like I said, I'm gonna be trying to do these videos sort of frequently again. I like doing them, they're fun, they're fairly simple, and I feel like they're fairly helpful to you guys as well. So as per usual, like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you like what I'm doing, tell me what you hate that I'm doing, and hopefully I can make these videos better every single time. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, stay tuned, techs.